Ash, the EMH in Star Trek's next show is Voyager's original Doctor 800 years later, and I love what this means. There are few characters in Star Trek more uniquely poised for a comeback than Voyager's emergency medical hologram, known affectionately as the Doctor. Played with perfect sharpness and warmth by Robert Picardo, the EMH began his journey in the Delta Quadrant as a piece of software with a bedside manner problem and evolved into one of the most complex, endearing, and human characters in all of Star Trek. Now, imagine this. A new Star Trek show set 800 years after Voyager, and the EMH is still around. Not as a callback or nostalgic cameo, but as a central figure. As wild as it sounds, it's the perfect way to move Star Trek forward while honoring its past. And I love everything that means. A legacy program in a new future. In canon, holograms can be shut off with a voice command. They can also, apparently, outlive empires. Think about the implications of the Doctor's survival for 8 centuries. That's not just longevity, it's endurance. The fact that the EMH is still functioning in this new show's far future timeline means someone kept him running. Maybe he upgraded himself. Maybe he became too important to shut off. Maybe he's now revered as a piece of living history, the AI who served in the Delta Quadrant and lived to witness the birth and death of civilizations. We've seen sentient holograms in Star Trek before Voyager, Lower Decks, even Picard. But this would be something else entirely. The Doctor wouldn't just be another hologram in the future, he'd be a time capsule with personality. A witness to centuries of change. A continuity bridge between Starfleet as we knew it and whatever it's become 800 years hence. It gives him narrative power, emotional power, historical power. The Doctor's arc has always been about becoming more. When we first met the EMH in Star Trek, Voyager, he was a utility, a program activated when the flesh and blood Doctor was dead. Cold. Blunt. All logic and no heart. But through hardship, curiosity, and his own yearning for identity, he became more. He named himself. He sang opera. He fell in love. He wrote holonovels. He questioned morality, ethics, mortality, and what it meant to have a soul. If ever there was a character designed to transcend limitations, it was him. So what happens when someone like that doesn't just evolve, but keeps evolving for 800 more years? That's the beauty of putting the EMH at the center of the next Star Trek. He becomes the ultimate example of self-directed growth. His programming was limited, but he exceeded it. His existence was conditional, but he became indispensable. His rights were debated, but eventually his personhood was recognized. And now, in this far-flung future, he's proof that artificial life can endure as more than just machine. He's not a tool. He's a being. A Star Trek first, a main character spanning a millennium. We've had long-lived characters before. Spock lived well into the next generation era. Guinan is centuries old. But none of them were at the center of a show set that far from their origin point. The closest analog is Star Trek, Picard, where characters like Data, Seven, and Picard himself carried the legacy of TNG into a new era. But even that show stayed grounded in the late 24th century. A new show set in the 33rd or 34th century would be a radical leap forward. It would allow Star Trek to break out of its historical bubble, where most shows have existed in the same 100-year window, and start asking brand new questions. What does the Federation look like after the collapse of known galactic structures? Is it still the idealistic force it once was? Is it fragmented? Has it merged with alien cultures or transcended its own original purpose? And right there, serving as our tour guide through this unfamiliar terrain, is the EMH. Not as a newcomer, but as the only surviving voice of Starfleet's golden age. He knows where the Federation started. He knows what it meant. He can contrast it against what it's become. In other words, he is Star Trek's conscience 800 years later. He's more than a character, he's a theme. Let's talk storytelling. Good science fiction uses characters to explore ideas, and there is no better metaphor for Star Trek's evolving soul than the Doctor. He began life as software designed by Starfleet engineers, impersonal, disposable. Over time, he became a champion of sentient rights, creative expression, and empathy. By making him the core of a new show, Star Trek would declare its commitment to those same values, even in the far future. And if the new Federation has drifted from its founding principles, he'd be the one to remind them and the audience what Starfleet used to stand for: truth, exploration, compassion, diplomacy, progress. He becomes the embodiment of memory in a world that may have forgotten. He also raises complex ethical questions. What does it mean for a digital consciousness to live so long? Is he lonely? Has he had friends die over and over for 800 years? How's that changed him? Is he more human than ever, or has he distanced himself emotionally just to survive? He could be hopeful, or haunted, or both. And what if, in this far future Federation, there are other holograms too, less sophisticated or more? Maybe he's the only one who remembers the hard-fought battle for hologram rights. Maybe he now mentors other AIs, teaches them about compassion, justice, and sentience. Maybe he's the father of a new digital race. What this means for Star Trek's future: if the next Star Trek series centers around a 900-year-old version of the EMH, it wouldn't just be a gimmick. It would be a masterstroke. Star Trek has always struggled to move past its legacy. From TNG to Picard, most new shows have revolved around familiar characters, ships, or settings. Even strange new worlds and lower decks thrive on nostalgia. But this concept does something smarter. It carries legacy into a bold new future. It lets the past inform the present without dragging it backward. Having the EMH in the future provides an emotional tether for longtime fans, while still allowing room for new characters, new worlds, and new technology. Imagine a new crew made up of aliens we've never met before, facing galactic problems we've never considered, guided by a being who remembers when warp drive was still impressive. It's the perfect balance. The old and the new, the past and the possible. Who else could still be around? If the Doctor survived this long, fans will inevitably wonder, who else might? Could we see an aged android like B4 or a rebuilt Data variant? Could holographic backups of other characters exist? Maybe Janeway left him a message in her final days. Maybe 7 of 9 is now a legendary figure, her legacy etched into Starfleet's databanks. Maybe someone out there still remembers Voyager, not as a ship, but as a myth. These possibilities allow for rich world building. The far future doesn't have to erase everything. It can reinterpret it, refract it through time. And the EMH, our window into both the past and the future, is the ideal lens for that storytelling. The Doctor deserves this. Robert Picardo's performance as the EMH is one of the best in Star Trek history. He took a character who was never meant to grow and made him one of the most beloved figures in the franchise. It's only right that he gets a second act, even if it's 800 years later. But this wouldn't just be a nostalgia trip. This would be a meditation on time, identity, loss, and persistence. It would be a story about how we carry who we were into who we become. About how progress isn't a straight line, but people, even holograms, can carry the torch when others falter. In conclusion, if Star Trek's next show takes place 800 years in the future and features Voyager's original EMH as a central character, it's not just a fun twist, it's a brilliant creative decision. It honors the past while looking boldly toward the future. It gives longtime fans something familiar to love while